The biggest event in voiceover is coming up. VO Atlanta, the granddaddy of them all. It's coming up March 23rd through 26th at the Hilton Atlanta Airport, the traditional venue. But this year, under the new direction of new owners J. Michael and Anna Collins. Brand new for them, also the 10th anniversary edition of VO Atlanta. I got a chance to sit down with J. Michael this week and talk about the improvements, both in the creature comforts and in the actual meat of the conference, the programming and speakers, what tracks are going to be available this year, and what some of the challenges were to be able to put this year's conference on. This is our interview with J. Michael Collins. And joining us live from Lobster Manor, as it's become known, J. Michael Collins, the owner of VO Atlanta. J. Michael, thanks so much for joining us today. I want to get right to it. This is the first year that you and your lovely and equally overachieving wife, Anna, have bought and are now running VO Atlanta. And I just wanted to say, this is for me, but I think I probably speak for most people in the voiceover community. When we heard that VO Atlanta was going to be no more, because that was the original announcement last year from Gerald, I think a lot of us were heartbroken. And when you guys stepped in, I thought to myself, my goodness, I can't think of two greater caretakers of this event that Gerald has built. So from me and probably from most of us, thank you for taking this thing over.
Well, we're grateful to have the opportunity. Thank you for that. And I just have to clarify that Anna is actually the CEO, and that's relevant because she has a very substantial background in logistics and global facilities management and events, and has actually run that kind of stuff for big companies from Santa Barbara all the way to the Middle East. So she's the brains behind the operation. I'm just going to be the mayor.
Mayor, summer intern, and vice president in charge of Lobster.
Something like that,
All
yeah.
Right. So you guys, this is your first year doing this thing. And I'm curious, especially maybe from Anna's perspective. I don't know if you can speak for her or not, but I think you can.
I try. It usually leads to consequences, but I try.
So when you this is not like you're starting from scratch. You're taking over an event that's got a lot of history and a lot of high expectations. What are the challenges that come along with that?
I think the biggest challenges we ran into were really early on in the transition process, just in the sense of understanding the scope of everything that was involved, understanding, what it is we were getting from an equipment perspective, from a logistics perspective, from, the relationships that were already in place with the hotel and vendors and things like that, and what we would have to do to maintain and foster those, and just putting our own processes in place and making it look and run the way that we expect it to. So in a lot of ways, the most stressful part for us was maybe last summer, into July, August, while we were really starting to get into the meat and potatoes of the transition and negotiating with vendors and that kind of stuff. And, understanding the logistical side of all of this. In some ways at this point, it's a little less stressful because now we're in the execution phase. And that's what we feel like we do well, and that we had our trial by fire with One Voice a couple of years ago, 2021, where the Brits were not. And by the way, if you hear a little voice babbling throughout this, that's Tom. That's Tom with me. Anna's seeing her brothers this week out in California and Dallas, so nice. He's here in the studio / man cave, watching hockey and playing Roblox at the moment.
You're raising him right.
Yeah, and blabbing away. But in any case, 2021 with One Voice, we were forced to actually run everything on the ground ourselves, and we didn't know that was going to be the case until about 3 weeks before the event, when they still had the travel ban, and the guys from England couldn't come over. And I got to see Anna in action, and I've seen her in action at EuroVO retreats over the years, which have, a lot of people know this who have come to these things, that I joke about me being the mayor, and I'm, smiling and waving, and she's putting out fires and making sure that everything is perfect. And so I got to really see, I've seen that in action for years at the Euro retreats, but those are small events. I got to see it in live action at one voice where we had, over 200 people on the ground in the middle of a Delta surge and somehow managed to keep anybody from getting sick, and put on a heck of a conference. And it was the first one back. It was the first one that came back live during the pandemic. And there's a lot of stress involved in that. And she handled it like a champ. And that's when I think I knew that, okay, if and when the VO Atlanta thing was going to happen, that we were ready for this.
So, yeah, and we can talk about the transition in a few minutes, but I'm curious about this year specifically. Let's get right to it. For those of us that are going, or those of us that are thinking about going, what has you most excited this year about VO Atlanta 2023?
Well, we're going to do it Squid Game style, and there are only going to be a few survivors left at the end.
Nice.
I have no idea what they're going to get to. No, what has us excited is that I think one of the reasons we decided to do this was because this is where I found my home in the industry in a lot of ways. This is where I found my tribe. This is where I found the people that now are some of my best friends in the business, and we've made those connections over the years. This is where I really learned about what this community was many, many moons ago, and we couldn't let it die. And so I think that having experienced it from the perspective of a speaker and then a sponsor and then somebody who was integrated even more behind the scenes, that now what we know how to do and what we want to do is to keep the things that people have loved about the conference the same. The content, the quality of the content, a lot of the flow of things, I think, has generally been pretty good over the years, and the concept behind the conference itself runs pretty well. But to improve the things that, maybe could be improved. And so in a lot of ways, that's little creature comfort stuff. One of the biggest complaints that we had listening to people last year and from past years was that they have to stand in that one coffee shop for, half an hour or 45 minutes to get a coffee, and maybe miss a session because they usually have one person or two people. It's a small coffee shop. So it's not like they can have 9 people back there. So it takes time to get stuff done. So what we're doing, we're putting coffee, tea, and water stations throughout the event. Some of them have been very generously sponsored by talent sponsors out there, and some of them we're just going to cover. And we know, the hotel charges us basically the price of champagne for coffee, but that's part of doing business, right? And we want to make sure people don't have to wait for that, and people have a little bit of a better experience and don't have to miss content because they want to get their caffeine in the morning. So we're going to caffeinate everybody. We're putting together lounges, which I think are going to look really cool and also feel really cool in a couple of different areas of the promenade. One is going to be that area that is sort of back by where the bathrooms are, and it's kind of a carve out, and it's a pretty big, actually fairly big footprint back there. So we're bringing in couches, we're bringing in bar tables and stools and charging stations and things that you can get in to make sure that you have power for your devices, and just a cool place to sit and chill. We're going to put some uplighting back there. We're going to do the same thing in an even bigger space that's down in the corridor leading to some of the other rooms. Like if you go back to Sinclair, for anybody who's been there before, the amphitheater that's back in the back, as you kind of go down that and then turn left and the right, there's kind of a big atrium that opens up. And so that's going to be a lounge with a bunch of uplighting and a bunch of really plush couches and really comfy, and a place for people, again, to rest, relax, recuperate, and literally recharge their batteries if they need to. We're going to be, trying to make sure that the hotel is staffed up the way that they're supposed to be. One of the cool things is they have a new general manager this year, and I've now got to see him in action a couple of different times. This guy's old school. He's an old school hotel guy. When I was there for the first meeting I had with him 7 months ago, whenever it was, he was out there sweeping the curb. And he was up there actually getting the suite that I had ready, just to make sure that everything was the way that it needed to be. So that's a good sign. That's what you want to see out of a hotel, and especially the leadership in a hotel. Somebody who takes pride of place in that. We were back just a weekend and a half or 2 weekends ago. Same kind of thing, just a little bit more attention to detail. Look, it's not a Ritz-Carlton. It's not going to be a Ritz-Carlton, but I've always found for an airport, Hilton, it's one of the better ones in the system. And I think that this new leadership that they've got in there is going to push that even farther. So hopefully the staffing's going to be better. The quality of the food was, we ate there. We had dinner there the night that we went to see Springsteen, and it was good food. So the food there that's something we noticed last year, that they had already really upgraded the quality of the food. In the past, that hadn't always been the case, and they've upped their game a lot on that. So I think that's going to continue to be consistent, and that'll carry over to the catering we're doing. Of course, we're going to do the lunches on the Friday and the Saturday. And I have to tell you, I mean, this is against my better judgment. I'm guilty. I'm the one for One Voice that told you no lunches. We're going to keep the price of the ticket lower, but no lunches, because the hotel, I mean, we literally have a $56,000 minimum food and beverage spend with them. And the lunches will probably wind up being more than that. So it's, they're crazy. It's like we're paying Michelin star prices for very good, American bar and restaurant food. But nevertheless, but we were keeping the lunches, and we're going to keep them the same quality or higher than they were last year. Get there early, because we've got a lot of people coming. So if you don't want to be eating late and looking for a table, make sure you get there early. But there's going to be plenty of good food for everybody. And I think also just sort of the way that we approach are what we look at as our customers and our partners in this, the people who are our attendees. We put in a no fault unconditional refund policy until 2 weeks before the event. So up until March 9th, you can get a full refund on your ticket, no questions asked. We've refunded, I don't know, 8 or 10 of them so far. People just can't make it for whatever reason. And I think the longest anybody's had to wait for a refund is 24 hours. And sometimes it's an hour or less if you catch the email at the right time. We don't want to, I know there were issues with that in the past with the previous ownership, and we don't want to run into a situation where people feel like, somebody in my family just died and I can't get my $549 back. We're not going to hold your money hostage. So we give you until 2 weeks before the event. The other thing we're going to do is up until the Thursday of the event, if something comes up and you can't make it, it's fine. We'll give you a credit for 2024 in full for whatever you paid. So we're going to make sure you get what you pay for and that you have a great time. And hopefully there won't be, COVID-23 between now and then. But so far, so good.
Good Lord, don't jinx it, for God's sakes.
I'm a gambler. We'll throw the dice out there.
Let's talk about speakers and content, and I want to start at the top of the mountain with the keynote speaker, the headliner, Deborah Wilson. Tell us about Deborah Wilson.
Deborah Wilson is somebody who I knew primarily by resume and reputation prior to our first conversation with her. And our first conversation with her just blew my mind. I've heard her described having spoken in other places as taking people to church, and I understand that now. With keynotes are interesting beasts, and I mean this lovingly, but with keynotes, conference owners try to be deferential with keynotes. So, typically it's, look, we would pay them a little bit more than most people, and it's also, hey, if you want to just come in and do your thing and buzz out, we just want to have you there and have your presence, and we're honored to have you. So we talked to Deborah, and Deborah was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do like 832 sessions. We're like, oh my God, yes. And so she's doing multiple breakouts. She's doing 2X sessions. She's doing the keynote, obviously. She's hosting a panel. And you're just going to get Deborah Wilson all weekend long. And she's one of the hottest and most celebrated talent in the business right now. We couldn't be more honored to have her there. And shout out also to CESD for helping to put that together. But Deborah is absolutely fantastic. So we're really excited. You're going to come and learn from somebody who will change your life, I think, in many ways.
I'm looking forward to it. Also, I looked at the schedule, J. Michael, and I thought, my God, are we going to be having sessions on the roof? There are 1 billion speakers at VO Atlanta this year. Was that part of the plan? And are we going to be having sessions on the roof?
We got a little carried away. What happened was, truth be told, I put out are you interested to a number of different people who I thought would be a good fit for the event. Anna and I anticipated we would get 50 or 60% of them saying yes. and we got like 95% of them saying yes. So we went up with a good problem to have, right? But at the end of the day, we have the space. It's a big meeting area. There may be a couple of sessions where they're hearing each other through the walls, but that's the price you pay to some degree when you have a lot of content. But I think it. I mean, for my money, it is probably the most star-studded, comprehensive, content-packed lineup that there has been at a voiceover conference. And that's our you guys know that I'm involved in One Voice too, and I think that our visions for these two are different. This is my baby and Anna's baby, and we see this as the Super Bowl, which is meant to be the place where people come and just have their blowout every year, and it's a blast, and it's the whole community getting together, and for our money, the bigger the better. Whereas One Voice with our partners and with Gravy and Hugh and them in England, we see that as sort of the rock and roll, blue collar, in the trenches, people working right now, the people who are out there just kind of slaying it on a daily basis right now, and just a bit of a different vibe. And we don't want 1,000 people for One Voice. That's a conference we want it to keep it at maybe like 300 to 500. That's a good number for it. So different animals, but this to me, it's always been the thing on the calendar every year that we look forward to as being the one where you just go and you get that it's a big group hug of hundreds of people coming together, loving on each other and loving on this industry that we're in. And it's a party, man. And you're going to learn something at the same time, but we're there. And part of this is we're there to celebrate what we do. And the more the merrier.
Absolutely. And so no sessions on the roof. That's good.
No sessions on the roof.
I'm afraid of heights. I couldn't do that. When you talk about people coming together, last year, of course, was the first year back from the pandemic, and Gerald Griffiths last year running VO Atlanta. And it was a little bit, because we weren't quite out of the woods yet, were we, last year? It was a little bit muted. I want to guess there was maybe 400 or 500 people there.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, I think we were feeling like we were closer to out of the woods, so people were a little more comfortable coming back in those numbers, but there certainly were still visible signs of what we had been going through. And it's, I think it probably depressed turnout just a little bit, but we are pleased to say that as of about 3 weeks ago, we exceeded that number, and we exceeded our target for this year, and we think it's going to be a lot of people. It's going to be good.
Yeah, bring your patience when you come to VO Atlanta this year. Let's talk about some of the things that have either come back or grown. I'm thinking about things like the Audiobook Academy. Tell us about the kids program. There's the Spanish program. There's some developments in all three of those areas, right?
And going back to, responding to feedback that we got from people who have been involved in the conference in the past, as we were walking around the venue last year after the announcement had been made that we were going to take over the conference, I had more audiobook people than I can count come up to me and go, "Hey, can you not make us feel like the redheaded stepchild down in the basement who, has to pay extra to have something that's isolated from the main event?" And that's something we really took to heart. So we talked to Scott Brick, who, in my opinion, is the Tom Brady of audiobooks, and somebody who I respect deeply, and is just a very good human being, but also very well connected in that side of the business. And we asked Scott to curate a program that would be brought back as part of the full weekend registration. So it would not be a separate thing. And if you'll notice on the schedule, one thing we're doing with the audiobook program and with the Spanish program is that we are incorporating them not just into the ticket price, but into the schedule like they are part of the general conference itself. So you're going to see them in different rooms. They're not all going to be concentrated in one place. You're going to be on the main stage. They're going to be in some of the other rooms. They're going to be all over the place. And it's meant to just be another part of the conference, even though we kind of are promoting them a little bit on their own. At the end of the day, they're part of the full ticket. And shout out to Scott also, who was instrumental in helping us get SAG-AFTRA to sponsor the audiobook program as the exclusive sponsor of the audiobook program. As far as I know, it's the first time the union has taken a sponsorship position at an industry conference. So we're honored to have them as part of this, and grateful that they're there. And again, I think that just speaks to what we're trying to do to really level up a little bit.
Well, Scott's thanks to Scott for that, and I know he's got a big year. I think he's getting married this year, right?
He is. He is.
Yeah.
And we actually got a sneak preview of The Ring in Switzerland when we were at the Euro retreat, and he was showing it to Anna and myself, going, I'm going to pop the question. What do you think? And we were like, yeah, man, you got this. And he sure did.
And he did. He got a yes. So congratulations to Scott and his fiance.
I want to briefly just circle back because I again, Valentina Latina, quick shout out on the Spanish program, and she's putting that together. We've got great content for Spanish, and you mentioned the kids program also, which we're having Martha Kahn run this year. So if you've got younglings who want to come, that's separate content. It's less expensive, and that's going to be in its own area, but when the escalators go down to where they used to run the airport shuttle out of the back there, we've got what used to be one of the restaurants back there. They've now converted into meeting space, and that's where the kids are going to be. They're going to be separately catered down there, so they don't have to come up and deal with all the craziness upstairs for lunch. But
I'm interested because I want to go back to maybe a year ago, maybe more than that, when Gerald announced that the year last year was going to be the last year for VO Atlanta. What was that conversation like? I mean, what did you and Anna look at each other and go, you know what, we should take this thing over? Did it have roots before that? Tell me what that was like.
The conversation started a while back. There probably 2018 or so. I mentioned to Gerald at some point, hey, if you ever decide you're through, let me be your first phone call, because it was, again, something I just relished so much being at this event every year. And then during the pandemic, there was a moment where Hugh Edwards and myself were having a conversation on Zoom with Gerald about the fact that we were going to run One Voice 2021 live, and I got the sense at that point that he had maybe made a decision. And so I followed up again and, said, look, is this something you want to seriously talk about? And he said, yeah. And so we did start, the process of negotiating, and Anna and I discussed, whether or not we thought it would be something which we could take on with everything else that we do. Look, we're I mean this in the most benign sense of the word possible. We're like sharks in the sense that if we stop swimming, we die. Okay. And that's just how we are. It's just the only speed that we know is just go, right? And I think when the opportunity came up, we just said, yeah, it's a lot of work, but yeah, and it's something that we felt like, our background and knowledge in the industry, the amount of time we've spent at these kind of events in the past, just was a perfect confluence to make sure that this was under the kind of stewardship that would do it justice going forward. And that's our mission, is to, we feel like this isn't just an asset that we've acquired. This is an asset to the entire VO community. And we feel a very, very distinct responsibility in maintaining it as that. I had Paul Strickwerda interviewed me for his blog not all that long ago. And one of the questions, and Paul, what I love about Paul is Paul, even if he likes, he doesn't pull any punches. He's gonna shoot to you straight. And he's gonna say exactly what people are thinking and what he means. And he said, one of the questions I've heard from a couple of people is, my God, it seems like the JMC brand is on everything. Isn't there a conflict of interest there? And I think one of the things that we're really committed to with VO Atlanta is making sure that nothing anti-competitive ever happens there. That this is, like I said, an asset that belongs to the industry. Yes, we're going to make some money off of it. We're not doing it as a charity, okay? But at the end of the day, we're bringing the other top demo producers in. We're bringing the other top coaches in. We're bringing the other top talent in. We're bringing people that we don't always have the longest and maybe most loving history within, but at the same time, they're people who the industry needs to hear from. So I think it's part of our mission and part of our responsibility to make sure that we are objective stewards of this, and that we continue to curate it with an eye towards what the community will benefit from most, and not what best serves our interests.
To that end, being a part of both now VO Atlanta and One Voice USA, how do you keep those events, for lack of a better term, separated? How do you keep one voice from not being VO Atlanta Junior?
Right. That's a great question. And I think what we're looking for, it goes back to what I talked about a little bit earlier, which is just the vibe of the two, to some degree, where VO Atlanta is big. It's the legends. It's the greats, the people who have been around and who everybody seeks after because they've voiced so many iconic characters or so many iconic commercial campaigns or whatever it may be. They're legends, right? And it's not that we're not going to have those people at One Voice, and it's not that we're not going to have people who are hitting it hard and in the trenches and working every day at VO Atlanta. It's simply that we kind of see One Voice as a little bit more of the, again, just the down and dirty, in the trenches, rock and roll, out there busting your rear end conference that maybe is a little less pageantry, despite having a great awards program attached to it, and there's a little more practicality, whereas VO Atlanta, we have our practicality, but yeah, it's going to be big and it's going to look great and it's going to be spectacular and it's going to be what it's going to be. I think content-wise, one thing we are determined to do going forward, and I think this has been an issue with conferences across the spectrum in the VO industry, is to really differentiate content. And so I've actually already at this point more or less completely assembled the One Voice lineup for 2023. And what I can tell you is there are probably not going to be more than 8 to 10 crossover presenters maximum. So it's going to be a very different group. However, it's going to be a no less impressive group. I've already got multiple top tier agents, multiple top tier casting directors, multiple top tier experts in various parts of the industry. They're just people you're not seeing on the VO Atlanta lineup for this year because they couldn't make it or because we had a lot of redundancy in that category or whatever it might be. So look, there are plenty of fish in the sea to fill both of these conferences up with distinct content that is going to be relevant and actionable to everybody who attends. And I think we're going to do a good job of that going.
Well, as we film this, we're a little bit more than a month away, and this is in terms of our industry, it's almost like New Year's Day when VO Atlanta hits. J. Michael, thanks to you, thanks to Anna, thanks to Tom, who I'm afraid he's not going to make it this year, right?
He's not. This is being the first year running it. I think we feel like we need to have our attention solely focused on the people who have spent their hard-earned money to be there. So we will miss him desperately, but we will sleep well, and and we will. That was almost too gleeful, wasn't it? And you guys can expect to see him there, probably in the kids program in the future.
Nice. And I'm afraid he's going to be taller than me if he actually shows up. So
he's going to be taller than me in about 2 weeks, the way he's going.
That's right. The 23rd through the 26th of March is VO Atlanta at the Hilton Atlanta Airport, now run by the Collinses. Everybody, thanks, J. Michael. I can't thank you enough for spending your time with us today.
Thanks for having me, Paul. I appreciate it, and thank you all for watching.